To many people, this is no more than a gale-swept rock in the Irish Sea, known mostly for kippers, the TT races, and this year for the row that blew up about birching. But what and where is the real Isle of Man? The hotels and boarding houses of Douglas Isle of Man, known and loved by 500,000 people who come here on holiday every year from the cities of the industrial north. To them, an island playground in the North Atlantic, not 30 miles from Cumberland, Scotland and Northern Ireland. There are those who say the Isle of Man is cut off, not only from the rest of the world, but from the 20th century, that the island is known on only 2 counts, the notorious birching, the other more famous. The birch, used to beat delinquent boys. There's talk of doing away with it. Even its defenders are becoming apologetic as the debate flourishes.
I'm very much in favour of it.
Charles Carouche, Speaker of the island's Parliament.
Why? It's realistic. There's far too much woolly-minded thinking in the world today. Far too much of the intellectual approach and far too much detachment from realism. You don't get this in an island. You have to live with facts, and we do. We face up to them.
Well, how does having the birch help you face up to facts?
Well, one has to face up to the fact that in order to contain bad behavior in a small community, and this bad behavior doesn't necessarily emanate from within the community, but in order to contain it, one has to accept forms of punishment that are realistic, and we believe birching is realistic.
Ken Noble, a fisherman, birched 5 times as a boy.
It frightens a child until he gets it. But I was about 3rd in the gang up until the first time I had it. And after the first time, I showed all the other lads the marks, and I was the boss of the gang. So I can't see how it's a deterrent. If anyone's supposed to have the right to hit children, it should be their parents. It's no use giving a license to another man to go and hit somebody else's children. It isn't a deterrent. It just makes you hostile against everyone and everything.
William Quayle, known as Bill the Bircher, a Douglas magistrate.
I know I've actually, in point of fact, been on record as being in favour of birching. I seem to have the name of being the arch leader of this. In fact, this is not true. I carry out the law as it is, and the law as it is at the moment gives us part of corporal punishment. And when I consider it is apt and just to use it, then I will use it.
What sort of circumstances would you use it in?
Principally violence. I'm a gentle sort of person, and I don't like violence. And if it is, in my opinion, the correct punishment, it's not always the correct punishment. In point of fact, I have been on the bench for some 17 years, and in this period, I have actually ordered birching 14 times, which is not really as if I'm constantly lashing out, is it?
Edward Collister, member of the island's Parliament, known as Ed the Red.
A barbaric institution, primitive, utterly primitive. It serves no useful purpose. It certainly doesn't reform. It doesn't rehabilitate our criminals. And it's abused in the Isle of Man. In the last 9 years, we've had 36 children flogged. Only 3 of them have reached the stage of bodily injury to anybody. The other 33 have been flogged for pure larceny, which I consider is very, very wrong.
Harold Swain, former member of the Colonial Police, now retired.
If they want to alter the laws, the members of the House of Keys and the members of the Legislative Council will, after due consideration, alter them of their own accord. It's no business of people from across the water to try and tell these people how to run their island. Absolute nonsense. The trouble is that there's so much of this permissive society and these across there, that all these do-gooders are making a mess of England. Absolute mess of it.
Would your campaign be satisfied if, in fact, birching was put into abeyance through a legal technicality rather than being abolished as a vote of conscience and policy?
Yes, we would like to see the end of birching. And personally,
Valerie Roach.
I would prefer, if it were possible, that people could come to see quite clearly what this thing means and to come to a decision that birching is wrong. But on the other hand, we want to see an end to birching. And if it can be brought about by a legal technicality, I'm very pleased.
Do you personally think the Tynwald is more likely to find a legal loophole or make a firm decision not to have birching anymore?
I think they're more likely to step through the legal loophole.
Why?
Because it's very difficult for people to admit publicly to having been wrong for a very long time and to having culpably not looked at facts which they should have done.
The birching issue came to a head when a boy was sentenced to be birched after trying to poison himself. Valerie Roach, a local journalist, helped to organise a petition calling for an inquiry into corporal punishment. She wants all children sentenced to the birch to be aware of their right to appeal. In Jersey, such appeals have virtually done away with corporal punishment. There, it was felt that it was wrong to birch a boy perhaps 5 months after he'd committed his offence. The Isle of Man has done away with trial by combat and witch hunting, but they do still have capital punishment. The islanders aren't particularly bloodthirsty, they just live by an old-fashioned and leisurely philosophy that even applies to the Isle of Man electric tram. In the Isle of Man, they've translated Spanish manana into Gaelic trait de l'heure, tomorrow will do, and tomorrow never does come. In keeping with this leisurely approach, the island's intercity express takes about an hour to travel 14 miles from Douglas to Ramsey. The glen of Tholty Will, the home of Lord Strange, only 10 miles from Douglas, 10 miles and a different age. The Isle of Man used to be a part of the island kingdom that included the Western Isles of Scotland and Skye. It's always claimed to be independent. Originally it was Celtic, was invaded by the Vikings, and now faces what could be a much more serious but less bloody invasion. The invasion of those who come to avoid taxes and those who come to retire. They call them come-overs.
Oh, yes, we had some permission at the time.
Lord Strange could be called a come-over. He gave up a castle in Scotland to build and run this pub at Tholty Will, but he has stronger links with the island than most who retire there.
Well, I came 10 years ago, actually, but I took a little time to fit in. I made over my old place in Scotland, which is a sort of ancient castle, and I wanted to go on in the family as long as possible, that branch.
What made you, in fact, choose to come to the Isle of Man?
Well, I have very old connections here, and I had some land here, and I like the Isle of Man. I like it very much.
What were your connections with it?
Well, we ruled it for 300 years with a mixed reception, and I think we did all right, really, but we were bought out, of course, for the smuggling. They wanted to control the smuggling better. And looking back at the history, we weren't too bad. We did a certain amount of good here. We did away with trial by combat, which I think is a very modern thing. And the interesting thing is, quite by a fluke, that my second daughter married a descendant of the Christians of Middletown, which is the oldest Manx family in the island. And go back, they got the oldest charter of anybody in the island. And they were the people we never quite saw eye to eye with. They're quite a celebrated family. They had Christian, Fletcher Christian, who started a mutiny in a ship called the Bounty, you may have heard of him. And they had a chap called Swarthy William, or Ilm Don, who we didn't see eye to eye with, and he sold up the island to Fairfax, to Cromwell, when Cromwell was busy beheading my ancestor at Bolton. And the next generation had him tried. Actually, he was already in jail because he'd fiddled with the Cromwellian funds, and he was tried by a court of some sort, and he was bumped off. And that's always been rather, what shall I say, a little bit offbeat in the family history. And now my grandson will be the tie of the two families, which is, from a historic point of view, is interesting.
What for you, really, is the appeal of the Isle of Man rather than perhaps anywhere else that you might have gone to live?
Well, naturally, everybody living in the country is a bit suspicious of newcomers. It's, I think, evolutionary that when some new person comes into their tribe, they want to find he's not a spy, they want to find he's not bringing disease in, they want to find that he's not going to fight with them, and therefore they have to be, I think, in any society, have to inspect somebody coming into the herd. And I think they get on very well with nice ones. I don't say they aren't all nice, but there are some people who come here and talk about the natives and think it should be all quite different from what it is. Well, of course, if they think that, they're much better not to come to the Isle of Man. Go somewhere they understand. And they're inclined to bring an alien culture in here, which I'm not awfully keen on, but some of these bungalows rather spoil the scenery, I think. But there's some very nice people coming in here. And somebody was telling me about, asking about the Channel Islands the other day. And I said, I don't hear much about Alderney. What sort of place is like that? He said, well, it's a rock with alcoholics clinging to it. I don't think we're as bad as that.
Douglas claims to have the only public casino in the British Isles. Its roulette wheels have 2 zeros, so doubling the odds in favour of the bank. The casino used to be run by a group of Americans who left after certain irregularities were uncovered. Now it's run by a local company under the watchful eye of the island's gaming board and pays the government £40,000 a year in tax and licence fees. This comes mostly from day trippers in for a quick flutter. A gentleman farmer like Richard Formby may not be a big-time gambler. Few who go there are. But there aren't many other places that people like him and his wife Beverly can go to in the evenings. It was English taxes that drove the Formbys to seek refuge on the Isle of Man. 3 years ago they sold up their farm in Lancashire and baggage, cattle and all finished up in one of the island's few mansions, part of one of the larger farms on the island. It's some 800 acres, enough to provide a comfortable income. Richard Formby pays no death duties, no capital gains or surtax, just income tax at the standard rate of 4 3 in the pound. He's considerably wealthier than he would have been in England, but just how much better off, he isn't sure.
Well, I've only been here 3 years, and I haven't quite honestly yet had the full advantage that I will get. I can only say that we pay a standard rate of income tax, 4 3. We don't pay any surtax, and we don't pay any capital gains. And of course the main thing is we don't have any estate duty. I don't think I would have left England if the estate duty problem arose. That is really the main reason why I decided to come here.
I was wondering how far perhaps you lived here for the benefit of your children.
Well, they're going to benefit, I would hope, obviously. As things are at the moment, anyway.
Are you ever conscious of making a particular sacrifice of your present for their future?
Well, I think I have done. Quite a considerable one, yes. I suppose I could have said right from the beginning, well, it doesn't matter, let's pay all the taxes and let's die and let him have all the money. Of course I could have done. But I suppose basically being young, one thought about it a bit more than perhaps people who are older and say, well, you know, I've lived here all my life and I'm going to go on living here. I think that's probably the difference.
Do you find that there is anything you personally regret about not living in England anymore?
Not really. I think we're just fortunate in having a nice property over here, and we can virtually do what we did in England. The only thing I do miss probably is shooting. Just because really in the Isle of Man you've got a certain amount of rough shooting if you want to trek over the hills. But there's no organised shooting at all. None at all.
Is there anything that makes up for this, for you?
Not really. No. Not really.
No shooting for Richard Formby, no hunting for his wife Beverly. Most people who retire to the island are at least 10 years older, and when her 4 children leave home to go to schools on the mainland, Beverly Formby could perhaps find her life restricted. After all, on the island, not only is there not very far to go, the number of places to go to, socially at least, is restricted.
Well, there is only one place, and that's the Cars, as it's familiarly known as. There's nowhere else to go.
What do you do there?
You have dinner. You have the odd platter. There's usually a very good cabaret. And you just meet your friends, because everybody goes there.
You don't sound totally enthralled by it.
I'm not totally enthralled by it. I think it's a sad thing that an island with this population could only produce one reasonable hotel to go and eat at, and to have any sort of enjoyment after 10 o'clock.
It would seem that boredom could be quite a problem in a prescribed community like this.
It is the most dangerous thing about this community, I think. But I don't see any remedy for it other than it's just entirely up to the individual, I think. You're either going to be bored and not do anything about it, or you're going to do something about it. And I think we've come here perhaps 10 years earlier than most people. I think a lot of people come at about 40, and we came just before we were 30. Well, I think it's going to be that much more difficult for us than it is for the 40-year-olds. Perhaps, you know, more people will come over when we reach the 40 age group, and it'll be more fun, I don't know.
If you had the choice, would you rather go back and live in England?
Oh, there are times, yes, definitely. There is a common thing known as Manx depression. I think a lot of wives suffer from it. You don't have to be a come-over to suffer from it. Many Manx wives do. But I think then, if you just have to go away and relieve it. Anywhere, you know, skiing or in the summer go away. I haven't learnt the remedy myself yet.
His Excellency Sir Peter Stallard, Lieutenant Governor of the Isle of Man, on an official visit to one of the farthest corners of his domain, the police station at Andreas.
How's the football team?
Yeah, they're doing very well indeed.
Is it this way?
Come this way.
The Isle of Man claims to be independent, but the United Kingdom looks after its foreign policy. The island's government, Tynwald, made up of the Legislative Council, the House of Keys and the Lieutenant Governor, looks after matters of domestic concern.
Yes, we have 2 matches in hand.
Yeah. Good.
We're doing very well. Very well indeed.
And the Christmas went off with nothing dreadful happening?
No, sir.
No need for the breathalyzer?
No, no, not as yet.
Good.
Not as yet.
Any accidents?
There has been quite a few due to icy road conditions,
yes.
but nothing serious.
Nothing serious? Good.
No, sir. No.
And you haven't been called out at night to any?
No, sir.
Very good. And the family?
Oh, they're all
I
doing
hear.
very well.
Good.
Very well.
How are you,
Good
Mrs.
afternoon,
Gotting?
Excellency. How are you? Fine.
And the family well?
Oh, yes, they're fine.
I'm sorry my wife couldn't come today, and she's got a cold, same as everybody else.
What sort of a
nowadays.
trip did you have?
Oh, not bad. Got a heater in the car.
Oh, well, that's not so
Yes.
bad then.
Yes.
I was wondering if you'd like to have a cup of tea.
Oh, I'd love one of your
Would you like
cups.
a cup of tea?
Thank you very much.
You cut when you're ready.
The Queen, as Sovereign and Lord of Man, is represented by the Lieutenant Governor. He lives in one of the finer government houses in the colonies. As Governor, Sir Peter Stallard could, if he wished, preempt total power, but never has. He served in Nigeria, was Governor of Honduras, and was appointed to the Isle of Man 4 years ago. By comparison, what might be thought to be a bit of a backwater.
Well, it might seem so, but one is far less isolated than
one was in the colonies. As a governor in a colony, one was very much more isolated than here. Here, for instance, when I want my hair cut, I go down to the one of the barbers in Douglas and have my hair cut by him, and I meet all sorts of people. The other day I followed the mayor of Douglas into the chair.
Do you ever feel at all that possibly you've come to a bit of a backwater, a place that people in England very often don't even know where it is?
Wherever you serve, you know, it's now 30 years since I was in charge of my first division in northern Nigeria, and I thought that was the hub of the empire. And ever since, I've discovered that wherever I happen to be working, I'm quite convinced that that is one of the more important parts of the empire.
Could I ask you, how many days a week are you involved in an official capacity with being the governor?
I would say I work a 5-day week, unless you call going to church and sitting in the government house pew work. That would be a 6-day week. But Saturdays, as a rule, I keep free of official engagements.
What sort of official engagements do you have?
Well, there's the meetings of Executive Council, Legislative Council, and Tynwald Court as a start. Then there are various formal dinners one has to go to, and supporting good causes. I would say that's the average day's work.
A new facade is being grafted onto the face of the Isle of Man. New, expensive houses where people can retire into the remnants of a past age. Rich people avoiding taxes retire here. So do those whose pensions would perhaps not be so comfortable in England. People who've retired from the colonies and find the England of today isn't the England they loved and left. As opposed to the come-overs, the islanders call such people the When-Eyes, people like the Swains.
The When-Eyes, that is really most amusing, because it's probably the fault of colonials like myself, or other colonials. I mean, I don't think I do it deliberately or purposely, and I don't try and force it down anyone's throat. But you see, when you're amongst people and you're talking, and some incident comes up, you might turn around and say, oh, when I was in Palestine, or when I was in Somaliland, or something, so-and-so and so-and-so happened. So it's the same over there as it is over here. And from that, you get the expression, the When-Eyes, you see, because I think the Manxmen, I don't know, they don't like the fact that resentful that you say when I was somewhere else other than the Isle of Man.
If they think you're trying to teach them something.
Oh yes, never tried to do that.
No, I think it's that they resent a little bit. You know, it's not a good thing to say, oh, well, when I was somewhere, we did it like this. They'll promptly reply, oh, we do it like this over here. And so that's that, you see. But I think I think there are so many of the colonials here now that I think we're getting more part of them, and they're getting more part of us, I hope.
And a lot of other colonial officials and in the colonial service who retired here. I mean, I met people who I was serving with in Palestine, and the most extraordinary thing was I walked in Parliament Street within the first 2 or 3 months of my arrival here, and I heard a chap talking about Kenya and Uganda. And I said, when were you in Kenya? And this fellow turned around to me and he said, you're Swain, aren't you? I said, yes, you're Milan. We'd last played rugger together in Nairobi in 1931, and this was 1967. Well, it was fantastic. I mean, we meet friends like that. He's living here now, and we play golf together.
How do you spend your time here?
Well, for my part, of course, I've got the house chores to do. They take quite a lot of time, and then there's shopping, and then we meet friends, and go for coffees, or come in to drinks, or go out to drinks, and go into Douglas occasionally. The time is surprising. Then there's the garden. Time flies. I never have enough of it. I never have enough time. And there's letters to write, and one thing and another. And it's gone before you know where you are. Then we come down to have a rest and watch television. Or read, or both.
Well, I find it's exactly the same. I find the older you get, the less time you appear to have. You're always busy doing something. I mean, I've certainly got the garden. I play golf about 4 times a week, more if I can get a chance. And I make, as I've told you, I make my own beer and my own wine. And then various odd jobs. I help about the house whenever possible, when I'm permitted to.
Well, Anna Ed in Dunushen is the knowledge at you on that man. Hanel and
It's easy to dismiss the Isle of Man as a backwater, easy to ridicule it as a Victorian anachronism, because it is small and peaceful, yet it has its own traditions, history, even its own language. People like Walter Clark, curator of the Islands Museum, are determined that the Manxness of the Isle of Man shall not be lost to its people and submerged by the 20th century.
How many people, in fact, are there on the island who can speak the Manx?
the younger people, you mean? I would say fluent speakers. There'd be somewhere between 30, 40 really fluent speakers who conduct really good conversation, like Dougie Farragher, Leslie Quirk, Willie Ratcliffe, Charlie Crane, people like that who are really fluent. There's only one old native speaker left. That's Mr. Madrell, Ned Madrell, who lives in Glenchas, in the south of the island. He's over 90 now, and he's spoken Manx since birth, of course. And beautiful Manx, Gaelic speaker.
Do you find any sign at the moment of there being a revival and interest in the Manx?
There's a tremendous revival and interest in it at the moment, yes.
Why do you think it is?
Well, I think young people are beginning to appreciate the value. We have a saying in Manx, din glad, din cheer, no language, no country. And with the invasion which is going on at the moment over here, of the influx of people who are coming, new residents that's coming over here, I think some of the Manx people are beginning to realize just what they're losing, and their language and their heritage is going, you see. And it's something they want to try and retain, I think.
Manxmen are proud of their island. They tend not to accept much that we take for granted. The rat race, technology, party politics, not even the date of Christmas Day. Newcomers may well celebrate Christmas on December the 25th. The Manx Society prefer the original Justinian date. This year, it was January the 4th. the festival of 9 lessons and carols celebrated in Manx at Kirkbraden.
And nu Ian Sailshaka, Yindus and Goo, Goylea, Dukas Nafala. Onze Tajacht van Goo, as van Goo Merish G, as van Goo G. Wees the G.
Hello, Ruth.
Hello, Lord Strange.
Happy New Year to
Happy
you.
New Year to you too. And here's a few beds.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Thank you very much. Look, And you're dropping all these lovely things.
Never mind, we can pick them up.
That's awfully nice of you. Thank you so
Good,
much. Now, we've got some of them.
We'll manage.
Great. Happy New Year. Now, and here's John Goes. Happy New Year, John. How are you? Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
The Manx New Year at Thalty Will, an odd occasion when farmers, farm workers and fishermen meet in a cluster's conviviality, yet with a curious undertone of benign feudalism, apparently questioned neither by the rich man in his pub nor the poor man at his grate. It might seem to be the sort of place where only the elderly could want to stay, yet many of the young wish to stay too, but can't, and challenge the attitudes of the generation which runs the island. Martin Collister and John Costain will have to leave. There's no alternative to leaving for Robin Smith. Lieutenant Colonel Spittle, a farmer, a member of the House of Keys, will stay.
I think it should be a choice, not a thing that is forced on you. At the moment, you've no choice. I think if you want the choice to go, see the world, and receive all its benefits and then bring them back to the island, yes, but to say, well, I've got to get a job and, well, I can't get one here, it is a sad state of affairs, you must admit.
Well, it may be a sad state of affairs. On the other hand, I would say it is rather a good reflection on the Isle of Man, in that with a small community there are far too many people of what I would call the managerial class who cannot obviously get jobs in their community because it isn't big enough.
Yeah, I agree. It's not
Makes the community bigger, but within reason, and then there will be more jobs.
It would be very unfortunate if nobody left the Isle of Man, of course. I mean, the people who come back are much broad-minded, much more broad-minded than the people who stay here. And one can see this amongst one's friends. But perhaps we should try and swing it a bit the other way and get them back a bit earlier, don't you think?
I mean, when a person is 65 years old, with all due respect, I mean, the better part of his life has been used.
I came back when I was 40.
Yeah, well, I mean, you came back at, say, the prime of your life to benefit the island, whereas a person who comes over to retire has used up the prime of his life in another country.
Yes, but whatever you do, you must provide people under the age of 65, shall I say, with responsibilities equivalent to what they are worth. And in a community of 50,000, there is a limited number.
There is no fantastic employment problem, but it's no use taking things sort of status quo and saying we're all right as we are, and there isn't an unemployment problem at the moment, which might be very true. But surely, for the benefit of the island, we want to, at the same time, bring more industry and therefore more residents here. Not just sort of say, well, things are all right at the moment. We must create more jobs and bring in more people at the same time.
A pub in Douglas, meeting place of the island's underground, long-haired, nonconformist, rebellious and young.
Frost and snow.
The song's not of revolution, but of the beauties of the island, the values of their great-grandparents' generation. Scarcely a revolutionary committee, but a schoolgirl, a poet and a songwriter, a gardener and odd job man, and a marine biologist filled with concern.
If you destroy a broadly based society with people of various generations living here and following various pursuits, if you destroy that and find that you have a retirement industry, a tourist industry, and very little else, and find that you're losing generations, then I think that if that situation comes into being, it will be depressing for the people who live there in the retirement industry and in the tourist industry, and they themselves will not be satisfied with it. I think they in turn will find it unattractive and will leave, and it will be very, very difficult to retrieve the situation if it gets to that point.
Yes, it seems to me, and I've only been on the island just over a year, that the Manx youth, the young Manx people, if they choose to stay on the island, they have to, in fact, come to terms with the problem of accepting a definite cut in opportunities that are open to them. And if they're the sort of people for whom the sort of natural environment of the island, you know, it is a beautiful place to live, there's no two ways about it. If this means enough to them, then fair enough, that they're okay. But for others, it must be a really sort of fairly agonizing decision as to whether to leave the island and chase career opportunities elsewhere, or to stay here and enjoy the island for what it is, and know that in a way that they can't really do much to change it the way things are. I think this is the other point. They are frustrated in attempts to change it, and the atmosphere really is so resistant to change that in the end they give up any ideas of changing anything.
Charles Carrouche, Speaker of the House of Keys, the island's House of Commons. Under his leadership, present policies seem to encourage the old to come, to allow the young to leave.
Well, yes, this is a reasonable sort of suggestion to make, but I think one must realize that over the years in any island community, if you have young people educated to a pretty high standard, as our young people are, then they cannot hope to secure jobs in keeping with their educational attainment in an island which has only something like 50 to 70,000 people. They have to go out and seek avenues of employment elsewhere. This has always been the pattern. It always will be with an island community. And I think our real role is to try and provide as much employment as we can in the first place, and secondly, to equip those who have to go out to seek employment in the best possible manner to be competitive in that sphere.
Doesn't this mean almost inevitably you're going to finish up with all the first-class people going and you're going to have left behind only the second class?
Not necessarily. You do have an exodus, as we recognize, but there are still quite a number of people who do find posts in the island. There is a lot of people who have a great love for the island, wouldn't go from it for anything, and these are the people who still maintain effectively the island's government generally.
But how effective is the island's government? Fishing used to be one of the island's major industries. Now there are only 2 white fishing boats. A government ice plant has been promised. It still doesn't exist, and if you can't keep fish, there's no point in catching it. Even so, the herring fleet's prosperous. The island's famous for its kippers and its shellfish. But most of the fishing in the rich waters round the island is done by boats from France, Scandinavia and Britain, but not from the Isle of Man. The second biggest industry after tourism is farming, but because of the climate, cool and damp and sometimes cold all the year round, only animal rearing rarely pays. Meat and livestock are even exported, most other food is imported. Farm subsidies are the same as in England, so are the welfare services and education. Despite occasional flurries and squawks from those against the system, the island is largely financed by a common purse arrangement with England. By it, English customs collect duties for the island and pay out a share. The Industrial Revolution only lightly touched the Isle of Man. In recent years, industry has been developed, and now the government can claim there's no unemployment problem, which isn't surprising as most of the young have left the island to find work. It's a vicious circle of no industrial development and in the end no workforce, perhaps inevitable on an island where all raw materials have to be imported. It's not a fertile territory for the growth of unions, as Fred Quinney, branch secretary of the Transport and General Workers Union, one of the 22 on the island, has found out.
Well, the biggest problem is endeavouring to recruit workers in some of these factories. They seem very hesitant to come into the union because they are, as I say, some of them are only small employers employing 20 or 30 people, but they seem very hesitant to come into the union.
Why do you think this is?
It could be said that some of them are afraid of their jobs.
Why?
Which is ridiculous in this modern age. If the workers band themselves together, they can improve their conditions. And there are 20 trade unions in the Isle of Man, which covers all spheres, and the unions are there to assist them, to help them, but there seems a hesitance on the part of the workers, except in the building industry, the public services, for them to join a union.
If the employer's attitude towards unions appears archaic, so to some does the government's attitude towards planning. Lack of planning in England in the 1930s led to urban development and the spoiling of miles of countryside. Bad planning allowed the canker of bungalow development. On the Isle of Man, Foxdale has become like the industrial dales of Yorkshire and Lancashire. As yet it's one of the few valleys to be spoiled, but many fear it'll be only a beginning, that other places as yet untouched could be scarred by development.
There is considerable control on development. The planning is most effective, and the island is developing along lines controlled by a planning committee specially appointed for the purpose, and we believe that the outcome is going to be one which will provide the necessary accommodation for an expanded population without in any way being detrimental to the amenities of the island.
How much planning, in fact, is there in the island?
Practically none.
Edward Collister, one of the two Labour members of the House of Keys.
We don't believe in planning. We're so retrograde in our outlook that we're quite content to go on and say we're doing very nicely. And that's all that seems to matter to our parish politicians.
Do you approve of this or not?
I certainly do not.
Why not?
Well, the world is a smaller place today. We can't think in terms of just carrying on as we did 100 years ago. The world is advancing at a tremendous pace. And we've got to be allowed. The amazing part is that Manx people are innately intelligent. But because we are so insularly minded, we refuse to recognize the fact that if we are going to succeed in the future, we must change our outlook.
The things we have now been complaining about happening in the island happen everywhere that is relatively unspoilt now, or was until recently, and that everywhere is being spoilt in the name of progress in the 20th century, which brings its own advantages with it, but tends to destroy the advantages of the 19th century or a different environment willy-nilly, indiscriminately. But what makes me angry is that here in the Isle of Man, there are a lot of people who pretend or even apparently believe that this is not happening. They swear allegiance to earlier values, to an easier way of life, to a slower pace where you can get credit more easily, where you know everybody on the bus, and they think they still have that they have a beautiful island. They have not seen the changes going on. They think that they are resisting what is not of value, what is repugnant in progress, and yet they are not. They are not taking any effort to preserve what they have inherited, whether it be preserving open land, whether it be restoring old buildings, or whether it be encouraging young people to stay on in the island and fight for the integrity of the island. They are not taking any of these steps whatsoever. They are letting everything drift way out.
The House of Keys, the island's parliament, has been accused of betraying the Isle of Man by default, of allowing laissez-faire to become an excuse for doing nothing, of allowing the Isle of Man to be run by vested interests. 22 of the House of Keys' 24 members are independent, but independent of what to do what? Charles Carruth is in no doubt as to the value of the system.
Well, it certainly has advantages in a small community such as ours. I wouldn't say that it would work in a larger area. Obviously, this is something that has, shall I say, grown over the years into a pattern that's suitable for the Isle of Man. It's a type of constitution that, if it was written down, you would say it probably couldn't work. But in practice, it does work, and work quite effectively.
Do you think there are any advantages to having a no-party form of government like this?
None whatever. We're wasting our time. We're wasting the public's time. We're not being honest with the public. We have members of the legislature who can change their opinions overnight.
Does it surprise you that there's been so little development of political parties here?
No, I can only explain it by saying that we're insularly minded. And we refuse to. I'm regarded as the representative of Whitehall, simply because I suggest that we should adopt the political system of Britain. That without party politics we shall never succeed. There must be a policy. This is the point. We have no policy. And we have no policy because we're without party politics. We must develop the Isle of Man, and there's any amount of money here. The Isle of Man's rotten with money. It's a question of how to use it, but it's a question of each member of the legislature or in public life. We're all right. We're doing very nicely, and we're making a lot of money. We really have gone, in the last 20 or 30 years, I think that the Isle of Man politically has gone backwards instead of forwards.
To many, the birch and TT races notwithstanding, the Isle of Man is the stuff of which dreams are made. As a philosophy, trade allure, tomorrow will do, has its attractions. But, as its critics point out, tomorrow does come, and tomorrow the Isle of Man could be spoiled by default.
Ten stolta fånganjak med rom, te seinel dun the glacier, shetan gestrede lava. Magillian mai sein dun goltai, ten smold out chitter a chalak, te gainjak shin the gullelai. Te bonnestre the grey Eva.